Now that we have our fret wire cut, we can't just install it straight into here because we have these bound sides. So we need to take the tangs off just at the very end. There are a couple ways to do that. If you don't have a commercial tang nipper that's specifically made for that task, you can take a regular nipper and just squeeze it here and give yourself a little bit of a crease this way, and then come back and do the same thing this way and weaken the material there if you can't get all the way through it, and kind of pry it off. You can also take a file and file this down right there at the very end like this. If you can get this into a vise or down on a surface secured, this works okay. Any of those manual methods, though, can bend the outside part that is super weak, and it can get bent one way or the other, and it can throw off your tuning at that particular fret. You can kind of fix that when we level the frets and dress the frets and get all that taken care of. But you can really kink up this outside part because the top of that fret is much, much weaker without this bottom tang. But this really is my preferred method. It does a good job of reinforcing the fret and not allowing it to bend. When you go through all of your frets and you nip them off, you're going to end up with quite a bit of waste material, and you're going to end up with a lot of little pieces of metal laying around. I will snip all the tangs off over this little bucket, and that allows me to catch all these pieces so that they're not floating around on my bench, because once they get on your bench and you leave them there, you set your guitar on it, you set some other piece of wood on it, it's just best to collect them if you can. Now you want to cut this pretty close to the edge of your fret slots so that your unsupported material is as small as possible. That looks pretty good. Okay, so once I do the first couple frets, I kind of have an idea how things are going. Are they wide enough? Do I need to monkey around with them more and get them pounded in? Now, without going much further, I want to give this a tap and see where I'm at with my fit of the fret in the slot and how tough that's going to go in. So I'm going to tap that in with a double-sided rubber mallet. One side's rubber, one side's plastic. Although depending on how inexpensive the product is, sometimes they're kind of the same, just with a different color. Looks like that seated just fine all the way across. I'm gonna lift this up. Yep, that's in there. That's seated nicely all the way across. I can see that the edges are down perfectly flat on the binding. That's exactly what I want to see. I don't see it raised up. It's sitting well along the entire width of the fretboard. So I'm going to continue on and do the second fret, probably the third fret too, just to verify that this same experience I had here is the same, and hopefully can continue on. With the mallet I'm using, I want to make sure that I've got a softer head on that mallet than the metal on the frets. You do not want to use a metal hammer on these at all. You can find a brass mallet to use, which is okay, but if you struggle at all trying to seat these frets with a brass or other metal mallet, you can sure risk denting these frets, and that's probably something that's not going to come out unless you level the entire fretboard, and you'll want to get that out of there. We don't want to see any dents at all in these, which is why I use the rubber mallet or the plastic mallet. Okay, I'm going to nip one side over my bucket. Now that I've got one side removed, I set that here next to the edge of the binding, and I look to see how much I need to take off on this end, and I usually use these barbs as kind of counting devices, so I count over how many barbs I need to take out right on the second one. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Nicely captured in my bucket. And hold that over here. I want to take a look, make sure, yep, that is where I want it. Before you pound these in, make sure that your neck is well supported underneath. Okay, that is seated nicely all the way across. All right, I'm going to move on to number 3. Oh, the other thing I should mention, on these, if you are counting your barbs on one side, and then you have to flip it over the other way, or vice versa, if you're counting on this side, and you're saying, okay, 1, 2.5 barbs, that's where I need to cut, and then you flip it over, well, these barbs aren't lined up on both sides. They're not symmetrical. So if you're counting over on these barbs that I need to go 1, 2.5, well, make sure that you're using that same side to cut, because if you flip it over, that's going to change your count because they are not the same on both sides. Hopefully that makes sense. Looks like I got to take off just a little bit more. Okay. There we go. That's seated well. Lift it up. That stays, no issues. I'm not seeing anything peel up on the sides. Double check that. Good. And that. Good. All right. I'm happy where this is going for right now. They are seating well. They're not too hard to go in. They don't slip out. Kind of exactly what I want to see from a fret install. So I'm going to continue along my fretboard, doing exactly as I'm doing here, and we will demonstrate what we need to do a little differently once we get to the body. And this one I actually cut a little too much off. I don't like that as well. I'm going to leave that. I'm going to cut a new one. It probably would have been just fine, but it was a little too much tang cut off, and I really do want to leave as much of that tang intact, especially to the edges where the top of the fret wire is unsupported. I want to leave that tang on there as wide as I can. And that one was maybe a 1/16, maybe 3/32 too short. If you find yourself having to smash these in super hard to the point where you feel like you might start denting the metal, then you might want to reevaluate the slot you're working on. Maybe widen it a little bit at the top, maybe take something, a small razor or another tool, and scrape out that fret slot just a little bit. They shouldn't be that tough to put in. Lifting fine, sides are still down, nothing's coming apart. I like the way this is going. If you do find yourself with a tight fret slot, you can take one side of those barbs and just take your file to it. Take a couple of quick file strokes. Don't remove the whole thing, but see if removing just a little bit of those barbs on the side with the file will work. And then if that doesn't do it all the way, flip it over, You can file the other side. There's a specialty tool for that will flatten the fret tangs. And there is also another specialty tool that if you have a slot that is too loose, that it will crimp and put a little zigzag in there to fit a little bit wider in your fret slot if they're too wide. The other hammer you can use is a plastic dead blow hammer. This one is still a little bit soft on the ends, but it has some shot inside the mallet head itself so that it eliminates a lot of that shock, and it does a good job of setting the frets. There's a lot less rattle that way, and the shot inside here eliminates some of that vibration that I was getting before. And that was the 12th fret where we had our 2 nail holes. And as you can see, it covered up those nail holes just fine. No issues on that fret holding in there. That's perfect. All right, so that's the 14th fret. That's the last one on the neck itself. Now we're going to start going over the body. Now we have the frets done up to the 14th fret, and we need to finish off these on the fretboard extension on the guitar body. Now my neck is not glued on yet, so I can take this off and just do this off the guitar, fully supported from underneath. But I want to show you how this is done. It's very important. The best way to do this, besides some of the commercially available tools that actually sit on top of the guitar and kind of hold it from underneath with a kind of a pry bar or a hold bar. The least expensive way I've found to do this is to fill an old sock or glove or something like that with buckshot. You want to get as large of shot as you can so that if the fabric starts to wear a little bit, that it doesn't stretch out and you start dribbling shot all over your bench. Just needs to be small enough to fit through the sound hole, and you'll want to come through and hold it from underneath here. And I'm going to do this, tip it upside down, try and find a nice spot inside there that seats well, and then flip it over. And there you have a fully supported fretboard from underneath. The danger of pounding these in without something supporting from underneath is that that pounding action could easily crack something, break something, knock one of the braces loose. That's quite a bit of impact. That's a much different stress than just a continual stress horizontally of 180 pounds of pressure from the strings of the neck. That impact is much more destructive to those braces on the inside. I am going to go through and get all these snipped off and set so that I can just go down the line and pound those in. All right, now that I have all those tangs nipped and cut, the last thing we would want is all those metal pieces to be floating around on our desk with a guitar that would happily accept that into the wood. I collect all these in here and then promptly throw them in the trash. What you want to do is get down low and look down the fretboard from both ends and see if you can see anything that is out of place, sticking up. We want to make sure that everything is seated as well as it possibly can. Now that all the frets are installed, it's really important to go up and down the fretboard. Look at each individual fret. Touch them, press down on them, make sure that nothing is moving, make sure that nothing is sticking up too high. You don't want to see anything underneath these frets. You might see a slight shadow line, but that should really be it. If these are sticking up at all, get those things pounded in. Make sure that they are all the way in. And then if you're working too hard, that means that something could be wrong. So you may have to pull this out carefully and take a look at what that fret slot is doing. If you are finding that some of the ends that are coming over the binding unsupported by a tang are lifting up a little bit, you can take a piece of wood and just hollow out a little bit here so that only the ends are going to touch. And depending on where you are on the fretboard, this would be up closer to the neck where it's a little narrower. If I needed to glue something down here, I would widen this out. But I want something that's just going to hold on to the ends. I would just wick a little bit of thin super glue under there and press this down on top of it until that was cured, and then move on to the next one. Fortunately for me, everything so far on this fret install has been somewhat uneventful. The frets installed just fine. Everything seems to be holding. Nothing is loose. I'm not having any issues on my binding where the frets are coming over the top loose or bending up or anything like that. Things are well. So I really can't demonstrate any repairs or fixes or emergencies here. So I'm just going to move on to clipping off the ends of the frets.